In this video, we're going to start talking about dividing complex numbers. So let's say, for example, we have 4 divided by 1 plus I. Now, how do we go about doing that? So in general, when we divide by a complex number, what we want to do is multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the bottom. So we've talked about conjugate in earlier videos. So let's just go ahead and jump right in here. Now, what we want to do is multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of the bottom, which is 1 minus I. Okay, if the bottom is 1 plus I, then its conjugate is 1 minus I. Okay, so when we do that, what's going to happen? Well, so what do we get on top? So on top, we have 4 multiplied by the quantity, 1 minus I, and on the bottom, what do we have? We have 1 plus I multiplied by the quantity, 1 minus I. Okay? So continuing to simplify that, what do we get? So on the top, we're just going to distribute the 4. When we distribute the 4, we get 4 times 1, which is 4, and then we get minus 4 times I, which just gives us minus 4I. Okay? Now what happens on the bottom? Now notice, what do we have on the bottom? 1 plus I times 1 minus I. We have something in the form A plus BI times A minus BI, where in this case A and B are both 1. Okay, this is 1 plus 1I, 1 minus 1I. Okay, so, and remember we talked about this in an earlier video. If we have something in this form, then the result is just A squared plus B squared. Okay, if you multiply a complex number by its conjugate, you just end up with the real part squared plus the imaginary part squared. Now, in our case, remember, A and B are both 1, so 1 plus I, because remember, I is just 1 times I, right? 1 plus I times 1 minus I is going to be 1 squared plus 1 squared. 1 squared is 1 squared is 1, again, and 1 plus 1 is 2. Okay, so 1 plus I times 1 minus I gives us 2. Now, if you're not okay with that, you could, of course, just do all the work here and just FOIL this, first, outer, inner, last. Just expand it out like we would in general when we multiply complex numbers. But since this is, when we divide by complex numbers, we're always going to multiply the bottom and the top by the conjugate of the bottom. So we're always going to have something like this in this form. Okay, A plus BI times A minus BI. We're always going to have something in that form. So we really do want to make use of this little shortcut technique here. Okay, now we're not quite done yet, so we can simplify a little more, right? So 4 minus 4i all over 2. There's a few different ways we can approach this, but the way I like to do, because it works in general, even if we can't always simplify this, we should always do this in general, split it up into 2 fractions. So we get 4 over 2, and then minus 4i over 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 4i divided by 2 is 2i. And remember, we have this minus sign in the middle here. So our result is 2 minus 2i. So if we take 4 and divide it by 1 plus I, then the solution that we get is 2 minus 2i. And that's an explanation of and one example of how to divide by a complex number.